Okay, hello, and welcome to the 20th episode of When the Heart Leads. I'm your host, Dr. Kate Newburgh, founder of Books of Eden Publishing, author of two books, A New Eden, Paradise Retold, and Finding Home, a mystical memoir. And I'm overjoyed to be with you today. I am not recording this one live. I had a couple issues with that, going live with it. So we're trying kind of the old method to see if this works. But the title of this episode is Highest Potential. And as I'm talking about the highest potential, there is a bit of a kind of a connotation we have with that. Oftentimes when we think of highest potential, we think about kind of the striving or the achieving or the overcoming or the enduring that we think is necessary to get us to that place of our kind of realizing our highest potential. And it may not surprise you that as maybe you're new to the podcast, if you are, welcome, or if you've been following my work for a long time, I work a lot with the energies of the feminine, the sacred feminine. And so it might not surprise you that I have a very different approach to the pathway to creating and realizing and embodying your highest potential. In a lot of what I've been discovering, the highest potential actually occurs through a stepping back and a reframing and allowing for what I am referring to as revelation. So a revealing. And in that revealing, something that may be familiar, something that may be familiar or that you've seen before or that you've kind of assumed you know the function of, right? It's revealed in a whole different way, right? And in that revelation, we're able to move forward. It opens up space, it opens up possibility for expansion, right? And so that opening up of a pathway, opening up of space that comes through revelation, that comes through a reframing of something we think we already know, right, is what I see as a really potent pathway to our own highest potential and realizing that and embodying that. Right. So I have in some of my notes, I'm saying beyond, beyond, beyond. So what happens is that we can often get stuck in our own assumptions or our own beliefs. And we're so in it that we don't fully know that it is an assumption or a belief. We think it's kind of just the way things are. And what ends up happening with this revelation, this kind of piercing lightning bolt of truth or of reframing, right, is that things beyond we ever thought begin to open up. Possibilities beyond what we ever thought begin to open up. And this is coming through for me in my meditation. So again, if you know me, if you've been following my work, you know that I meditate every morning. It's kind of that beautiful liminal space of waking where I'm still kind of in that dreamy state, and it's where I can receive a lot of messages because my rational brain hasn't quite kicked in yet. All right, so I meditate upon awakening every morning, and something I've been noticing in my meditations recently is a really powerful kind of cleansing or clearing of my own brain. You could say my mind, my brain, my prefrontal cortex has been very activated, and I've been feeling like a clearing. Sometimes it feels like my eyes are crossed, like I can't see straight because something is being rewired. It's almost like it feels like something is being rewired. And in those meditations recently, I've been experiencing just a very powerful spaciousness. Like it's as though all of the anxiety and the fear that that's been so familiar, right, that it's kind of, it feels like it's accompanied me kind of every step of my life, and it's become so familiar. It's like I couldn't imagine a life without it because I didn't know that was possible or what that could be like. It's almost like that kind of constant undercurrent of anxiety is just washed away, and I can see the location of it in my brain. Right, so my brain becomes cleansed, my brain becomes cleared, And I am the recipient of this very potent spaciousness. And it's this wide open place of relaxation where I can experience what it's like to not at all have that undercurrent of worry or anxiety. Right. And so a question that I started to have in this, and it's not like these kind of this state of open openness, expansion, that state of purity and clarity of mind, right? That's kind of that's within the meditation, and I can touch on it throughout the day. I can come back to it. It's kind of my touch point. It's not necessarily a state that I'm maintaining all the time, but it is something now that I can kind of return to or intentionally orient toward, which is really very cool. But it got me thinking about what actually is, and if you're watching the video, I'm touching my forehead. If you're listening, yeah, it's funny because I've been feeling this, like I said, the clearing in my prefrontal cortex. So I've been thinking about what actually is the highest function of the prefrontal cortex. All right. So it almost feels like that's the seat of my own self-reference. And the form that my self-reference takes is oftentimes kind of scrutiny or judgment, right? Or anxiety. And this is where kind of the scheming, the planning, the trying to figure things out, like the constant trying to figure things out, strategize, make sure everything's working out the way I think it should, right? It kind of all is happening, what I'm realizing, in this space of my mind, like physically, physiologically in that place. And so I began to think about if the prefrontal cortex isn't being used for self-reference, for strategizing, for figuring out, like that kind of endless, exhaustive figuring out, right? If it's not being used for that and it's suddenly relaxed, right? And all of that has been relaxed, then what actually is the highest function or the highest use or the highest potential of the prefrontal cortex? And I can say that I don't necessarily know the answer, right? I believe it has something to do with a wider connection, kind of a wider connection of the mind, right? The open spaciousness of the mind, a wider connection with knowing, with a powerful knowing. But I don't fully know yet, right? So, but the fact that question is beginning to emerge is allowing for new possibilities to come forward for me. So, one of the things that it seems to be, one of the messages that I'm receiving is that as I turn again and again and again toward this feeling of clarity, of peace, of spaciousness, this kind of absence of anxiety, this absence of fear, this absence of planning ahead, figuring out, strategizing, all those things, that I'm tapping into neural pathways that have not been activated or have been in the process of being activated as I started meditating 6 years ago, right? Without really knowing it, I was forging new neural pathways in my brain, like a new physiological structure of my brain itself, by consciously coming back to that place of peace, of spaciousness. And this message I'm getting is that the recoding, the reformation of the brain, of the neural pathways of the brain, is going to actually affect also the physiological nature of my body. And I don't know exactly what all of this means, but the mind, we talk a lot about how the mind is what forms our reality. And if the mind is shifted indelibly, right, it's almost like there's these tracks, and there's these deep tracks of anxiety, right, that my thought patterns seem to go into. And as I'm speaking, I don't think I'm the only one who experiences this, right? That when in times of change or chaos or disruption, or in general, like our thought patterns can kind of fall into, because it's a deep rut, right, that we've created. kind of a track of anxiety, fear, figuring out. But alongside that, I have been forming in my meditations this whole other physiological pathway. And so now that's becoming my default way of being, right? As I consciously turn toward that, because it feels better. It feels so much better to be in that place of spaciousness. It's a leap, right? Because it's such a different way of being, right? So it's a bit of a leap, but at the same time, it feels so much better to be there. I'd rather be there in that place of open spaciousness. So I keep returning to that, right, consciously. And as I do that over and over again, that pathway is beginning to form. That track is beginning to form as a default pathway for my thoughts, for my mind, right? And so that is going to begin to shift the actual physiological nature of my body itself. And I don't know, like I said, I don't know exactly what that means. But it's a really, really cool question to feel into. And okay, so what is all this? So I went into this kind of reframing highest potential, this allowing for revelation. And there was an example, right? This revelation of, if my prefrontal cortex isn't being used for scrutiny, judgment, planning ahead, strategizing, figuring out, right? If it's not being used for those things, then what is actually the highest function of it, right? And that's a question and that's the fact that question even came in is a powerful revelation, right? Because it allows for new expansive possibilities, right? So I'm opening to these questions, right? And in kind of offering that as an example, we can start to look at our own lives and the reframing that is possible, right? As we begin to open ourselves to revelation, right? To new and expansive possibilities, to questions we've never had before, right? And it's those questions that are going to begin to lead us. So I have had a guide for this, and I'll bring him up, and it's Merlin. Well, I see him as Merlin. And he often shows up. So in my meditations, he's been appearing as a really kind of a really loving presence, definitively masculine, but without any of the, what you might say, kind of the baser masculine or like the baser masculine tendencies. So just before anybody gets maybe taking umbrage to this, we all have masculine and feminine energies within us, and there's refined and sacred expressions, just as there are kind of more harmful expressions of both of those, right? So as I'm encountering who I see and experience as Merlin, right, I am experiencing this very sacred masculine presence that is embodying kind of protectorship and wisdom and guidance and humor as well. I always find that he's got a lot of humor. So he's been showing up in my meditations, and whenever he comes to me, I find this kind of almost like a trickster energy with him. Like, he likes to destabilize things. He likes to reform things. He likes to show you things from different perspectives. So suddenly you're looking at something as kind of what you could say commonplace, literally, on your forehead, right? As the prefrontal cortex, something as a daily, this thing we make daily use of, right? Suddenly I'm looking at it, thinking about it in a new way. And this is his form of alchemy that he's taught me. And I do have another example of this. So one of the times that Merlin worked with me very strongly was when I was in Scotland. And if you have gone to my website, or if you know me, you'll know that I wrote a book, Finding Home, a mystical memoir, which I wrote while traveling in France and Scotland. And there's this really powerful moment that I had with Merlin in Scotland on the Isle of Skye that showed me this trick of perspective, the alchemy of reframing things that we think we already know, right? I'm just going to show us a quick example of that. So So Merlin, I was in Scotland, and I was visiting the Isle of Skye, and it was November, so it was kind of past tourist season. November on the Hebrides, or those far-flung isles, very rainy, kind of dark, very cold, but also like very potent energies with all the kind of other. I mean, I was a tourist of sorts, right? I didn't live there, but with everybody else gone, there's a sightseeing, all that. Where I was, people were speaking. Many people, their first language was Gaelic, and Gaelic is this beautiful language that I talk about in my memoir as being kind of reminiscent of the land. So when you hear Scottish Gaelic, you can almost see or feel within it like the moors and the bluffs and the ocean and kind of the austere beauty of a lot of that land. It's very mystical, very beautiful land. But I want to show us something. So I went to see, while I was staying on the Isle of Skye, I went to see the Old Man of Storr, and that is spelled Storr. And if you look up on the internet, the Old Man of Storr, you're going to see kind of this big rock. It's a huge standing stone. It's an absolutely gorgeous standing stone that people call the Old Man of Storr. And he looks out over the bay, the Sound. And I called it, the title of this chapter that I'm about to talk about it's called The Eternal Sound. And as I was, so it's kind of a famous destination. So I get there, and there's a path leading kind of straight up this mountain, or this bluff, so that you can go up there and behold the Old Man of Storr. So I am on my way. I'm going to move this so it might make a little noise in the microphone. So hang on. Just gonna move my notes for a second so I have some room to move. So I go up, I get to the top, and I take a picture. I'm going to show you. So if you're not watching this on YouTube, I suggest maybe you find the link, because this is a big part of the teaching for this one. So if you're looking here, right, the Old Man of Storr is technically referred to as this stone right here. This standing stone is kind of pointed. So this is kind of what people call the Old Man of Storr. It looks out over the Sound. And if you look online, this is the stone that comes up most often as being the Old Man of Storr. You'll see in this picture this huge crop of standing stones, right, that I saw as I stood kind of at the end of the trail. Right, this is kind of where the trail ends, and you're not really supposed to go past that. So this is the assumption, right, that this kind of pointed standing stone here, that this is the Old Man of Storr. I want to show you something. And this, what I'm about to show you, you will not find anywhere on the internet. I have looked and looked and looked and looked, and it's nowhere. Right, so this was a revelation that was gifted to me. And I think I was probably not following the rules, but I went and started rambling around kind of underneath the standing stones. I wanted to kind of go look at them. I looked around. I went out to some outcroppings overlooking the Sound. And as I was wandering around, I turned and looked back at that crop of standing stones. And the specific angle that I was standing at showed me something completely different. I'm going to show you right here. Boom. There. That is the Old Man of Storr. So you can see. So this is if you go back, so I'm going to try to explain this. So if you go back, right? Here's all of the stones, the crop of standing stones. And if you turned it like this, that's how I was looking at them. So this is kind of the horizontal view. The Old Man of Storr is the layering of all of those stones come together. And what I saw was, it's unmistakable once you see it. That's Merlin. There he is. There's his pointed hat. There's his beard. There's his staff. There's actually a face kind of in these rocks too. So I called it the Men of Storr, because this looks kind of like a bearded face. But here he is. Merlin standing and looking out, and you'll see the face of It looks out over, if you were to stand where he's standing, the sea is over here. So he's looking out. I said, Merlin, the old man of store, gazing out over the eternal sound. That's how I labeled this picture. So you will want to watch this video. This is important to watch as a video. So just kind of let that sink in for a second, right? It was a really powerful gift for me to receive. And especially because I'd been working with Merlin at the time, the whole time I was in Scotland. And I wrote, just to kind of bring it together, I said I wrote, and if you're following along, we're on page 273. But I wrote, there is, as there always is with Merlin, a deeper teaching at work here. A metaphysical teaching of perspective, of alignment, the magic of manifestation that is open to us right now if we simply make ourselves available to it. Of course, Merlin would materialize through a simple alchemical process, a bending of time and space through a precision of openness, alignment, and reception. He is a spellcaster, a master of time and space, a holder of the secrets of the elements. I laughed and laughed at this simple trick, the converging of time and space and location that would result in the magical emerging of one so dear to me. I laughed, and I swear I saw him wink at me. So the alchemical process that happened here of manifestation of the old man of store, of Merlin himself, right? It wasn't like a cosmic hand picked up the rocks and rearranged them, right? It was a matter of stepping into a different perspective entirely, where all of those layers came together in a very specific way. And I'll tell you, I walked around, and that view is that the view of that, the rock of Merlin is only available from that one spot. There's nowhere else you can stand where you can see it. And I was just led directly to there. So there was a little bit of rule breaking. There was, there was a little bit of opening to perspective. And then there were all those layers coming together in a very specific way. And it was that moment of revelation where the old man of store wasn't that pointy rock, which I promise, if you look all over the internet, that's what you're going to find. Right? Instead, it was revealed to me as Merlin, but you had to be standing in that one spot, and you had to be open to thinking differently. You had to be open to the idea that the old man of store wasn't that one standing stone, right? But that it could be something else, something more. And then the magic of it all is revealed. And one of my favorite lines that I've ever written is from my first book. And I say, just because you can explain something doesn't mean it's not magic, right? Just because you can look at the antecedents of something, the steps that something takes to materialize in your world, doesn't mean that there wasn't magic at play there, that there wasn't an alchemical process at play, right? And this is what I'm talking about when we're talking about our highest potential, right? And I have one other quick example of this. I was asked to give a talk this summer. So I'll be giving a talk this summer at an educational leadership conference on burnout. I've mentioned it a few times, but I've done my doctoral research on burnout. And I bring that up a lot because in some ways it was the beginning of this path of looking at what is deep fulfillment, right? What is a life of deep fulfillment? And so I'm giving this talk, and a lot of times with something like burnout, what I discover is that people just kind of think, well, that's just the way it is. That's just how it works. Right? There's not really anything we can do. And it becomes this kind of big amorphous issue that is so overwhelming that it's like a snow globe of kind of confusion or bewilderment or anxiety or fear. And like we think about the word burnout, and it just feels so big and impenetrable that there's nothing we can do about it. Right? And so there's like, I could say there's oftentimes a lot of hand wringing around it. Like people are like, oh, I don't know what to do, right? And we feel very disempowered in the face of it. But if you begin to drill down into very practical mechanisms of any workplace, right, you begin to see that there are ways of reframing what already exists, reframing it, recoding it, reconfiguring it in a way that it suddenly becomes a supportive structure and not a structure that depletes life force. Right? And so this is what my talk is about, that there are very clear, concrete, practical things that we can do within the structures that already exist. Right? It doesn't even call for an entire overhaul of everything. Right? And this is the magic of Merlin. He takes what already exists, what already is, and he just gives you a new place to stand on it. This suddenly reveals all these different possibilities, and that's revelation, right? And that's magic. And a lot of us, and sometimes it takes some humility for that, because we think that we need kind of another big bang in order for things to get better. But sometimes all it requires is for us to stand in a different place, right? And that's an act of grace to bring us into those places, right? So when it comes to claiming your highest potential as a divine being on earth, right? And maybe that's enough. Just that reframing of yourself as a divine being might be enough, right? For you to begin to claim your highest potential. Maybe what I just said was that penetrating act, that new perspective, right? When it comes to claiming your highest potential, it's not, from what I've discovered, it's not an act of constant endurance or overcoming, or, we didn't need to get bulldozers in to move the rocks around, right? The standing stones. All we needed was to stand in the right place, to see them from a different way, in a different way. And so when it comes to claiming your highest potential, who are you? What is your highest potential? What is the highest function of everything within your life, of all your different characteristics? So another thing that I've been noticing as I kind of move more and more into this path is that there's no need for me to deny or suppress or eradicate any aspect of my nature. In fact, one of the things Merlin has been telling me is to surrender to my nature, my true nature, allow it. Right. So as a quick example that I wasn't expecting to go into, but anger. Right. So my family will attest that ever since I was a young child, I've had pretty significant anger issues. And I had issues as a teenager with kind of being someone who flouted authority. I know, we're all shocked. But I remember this one time that I was in like an assembly in my high school, and they brought in for the whole school was gathered there for this kind of talk that someone was giving about drugs. And I remember thinking that the entire talk was based around scare tactics. And it was designed to just kind of scare everyone, like traumatize them essentially into not doing drugs by highlighting all of the horrible things that would happen. Right? I remember thinking, not that I was pro drugs or, whatever at that time. I just remember thinking, this is an important topic. If I was going to, with my maturity and wisdom this many years later, maybe the thought process could be something like, this is an important topic. However, I really disagree with the way these people have broached this topic with us, because there aren't any facts. There isn't any, like, it didn't seem like there was a consideration of us as critical thinking, fledgling adults, essentially. And I stood up when it was time for questions, and I kind of laid into the presenter. And with all my kind of teenage rebellion, I was not polite, and I was not nice, and I was really rude, and I was also kind of right. My points, what I'm trying to say here is that that instinct for questioning, right? I didn't know how to wield it then with wisdom and maturity. So all I really did was alienate people, no matter how kind of cogent my points were, right? And so for many years, I suppressed that part of my being, and it led me into a lot of difficult situations because that kind of oh, we have a visitor, everyone. This is Aura. I mentioned her in the other. Did you come in here to say hi to everyone? Okay, Aura's gonna just hang out with us as I finish my point. So I didn't have the maturity to wield this kind of this anger, this questioning. And so all I ever got was backlash. And so I kind of suppressed that. There wasn't really anyone I knew who had kind of the facility to see that as a strength, right? Most people just saw it as really obnoxious. I can't blame them. But over the years, I began to reclaim that anger, that questioning, that deep questioning of what is. And it's suddenly become one of my greatest strengths because it's caused me to allow for these revelations in very kind of even in the most mundane places, right? These revelations occur. And so it took me a long, long time to have, again, the wisdom and maturity to really claim that. And I'm not perfect at it. But at the very least, I've begun to claim that as a strength. So when we talk about our highest potential, right, the other part of it is really allowing yourself, as Merlin had been coaching me to do, or guiding me to do, to really embrace your full nature. So those things about you that might seem like they get you in the most trouble, right? And maybe they have in the past. There's something really potent and powerful in those things, right? And it's this stepping back, this reframing, this allowing of those things to reveal themselves to you that is going to be a really big part of your journey into your highest potential. However, it does take a lot of self-love and compassion because it's going to mean undoing all of the things that you have been told about those parts of yourself that other people can't handle, right? And maybe sometimes you can't handle until you begin to grow more in that self-love, self-acceptance, compassion, and love. So ultimately, this full claiming of the self and of our true nature is going to lead us into that highest potential, into that state of thriving, right? And even if you don't quite know what thriving is, and I think most of us are kind of still discovering that, right? What true thriving is. Just these questions. What is this for? What is my anger for? What is my kind of persevering drive? What is that even for? This deep, dark thought around cruelty that popped in, right? What is that? You know, what's the highest expression of that? What's a way for that to be transmuted, alchemized, you could say. So all of these things that are coming up right now for many of us, right? This kind of really potent invitation into our highest, claiming our highest nature, our highest potential. This is going to be emerging through our willingness for revelation, to see things in a different perspective, not to push it away or assume we already know, but to allow for new ideas, new perspectives, new places to stand, to come in for us, right? So, just kind of scanning my notes here. Yeah, so that could be the practice right now. Just ask, what is this for? And please show me the highest functioning of this or that in my life or in my personality or in my being. Show me the highest functioning, how it can contribute to my thriving and my joy. Help me see that. And that'll begin to lead you more and more into that reclamation of self, that full and loving reclamation of self, which then leads into that highest expression of your being. All right. This has been the 20th episode of When the Heart Leads. I'm your host, Dr. Kate Newburgh, as they say in Scotland. I'm starting to adopt that pronunciation. When I was in Scotland they pronounce Edinburgh that way. It's the same way with my last name, Newburgh. I kind of like that. So this has been the 20th episode of When the Heart Leads, Highest Potential. I'm your host, Dr. Kate Newburgh, founder of Books of Eden Publishing, author of 2 books. For more information on my work, what I do, I have a writing mentorship program I've opened up. I also do intuitive writing sessions, shamanic healing sessions, all sorts of things. I also do talks on burnout. If you have questions about any of that, please do reach out. You can find my contact information on my website, which is booksofeden.com. And it has been such a pleasure to connect with you all across time and space, and with our little mascot here, Aura. Yes, that's Aura. Maybe mascot's the wrong word. Little spirit guide. Yeah, she likes that better. From my heart to yours,